Everybody. Today what I want to do is talk about a particular book, this one, 5 Minds for the Future. In terms of leadership and the capacity to add value in decision making, I regard this as one of the best books that I've read on the subject. It really covers a whole lot of elements that I think the modern leader and manager needs to at least be aware of in the context of developing any effective culture or dynamic environment in which they operate. In fact, I referenced the book quite a lot when I lectured at university, specifically, obviously, in the field of leadership, because there's many texts and there's many volumes on how people should be a leader. But what they tend not to do, at least the ones I've read, is deconstruct the nature of leadership culture and leadership personality and psyche in a way that's easily digestible in the context of a modern 21st century environment. There's 5 key elements in Howard Gardner's book, and I want to discuss each one of those and show you, at least from my perspective, how they actually fulfill a role in the personality of a leader. The first one is cognitive, in-depth understanding. It gives the individual a deep awareness of the core subject and core discipline in which they are expert in, be it in terms of engineering, be it in terms of different forms of industry. There's a real need to be aware of the nuance and dynamic elements within that particular industry so you can communicate effectively in terms of decision making. This very much has been embedded within effective leadership theory for, 200-300 years. The challenge, however, in the 21st century is, and I've experienced this in the university system, is that people will have exceptionally deep awareness in the environment in which they operate, but we're living in a really heterogeneous environment where there's so many components that go into decision making. And if all we do is focus on key experience that we have, we might find ourselves in a position of missing out opportunities. The next component that Gardner talks about is synthesis, and that builds upon the cognitive awareness of the first discipline. Synthesis, that's easy for you to say. Synthesis is the capacity to understand a range of disciplines and bring them to problem solving. This is best exemplified in the Apollo 13 near disaster, when an explosion on the capsule in space led the 3 astronauts to be in a life-changing and life-threatening environment. The only way they could solve it was on the ground in NASA. They brought together a range of different experts in different skills and different environments, and they were able to come up with a solution. Synthesis of ideas also ensures that we don't become focused purely on one pathway. Studies out of Harvard had indicated that if all you've got is people who see the world the same way, the decision-making process actually becomes much more extreme. And we can see that in the political discourse taking place in the Western world today. Diversity of thought actually enables better decision making. The third component that Gardner talks about is the nature of creativity. I use the metaphor of I can see ghosts. Of course we can't, but truly creative people can see things other people can't see. And being able to have deep understanding of what you're about, plus the capacity to bring in a range of different components, enables you to come up with solutions that otherwise might not be seen, understood. Einstein said that it was not the answer that was critical, but the question. Effective creativity is based upon the effective question. Understanding what the core mission is and being able to come up with the associated solution. The final 2 components of Gardner's narrative I regard as incredibly important but often overlooked. The first one is empathy. What does empathy mean? In simple terms, I would define it as the capacity to appreciate another person's position. Doesn't mean you agree with them, but it means you're aware of it, because each one of us will have a view of the way we see the world. Now, we're going to bring synthesis, creativity, and deep knowledge into the narrative. We've got to manage people in a way that people feel that they're respected, people feel that they're listened to. Justice theory talks about that. It's not so much the decision that matters, but the process by which that decision is achieved. Even if it's not gone your way, if you feel you've been listened to, and there's a transformational and transactional justice coefficient, we're in a much stronger position to actually accept the outcome. None of us get everything we want. I'm sure even Taylor Swift has her problems, although I wish I had those. But it really comes down to the simple awareness that in dealing with other human beings, it's important that we appreciate them. And I've experienced firsthand that when you're dealing in structures and organizations, the human component is lost. And you lose good people. The final element that I'd like to explore is the nature of ethics. I think all decisions should be built on an ethical foundation, but the question is, and some people might argue, well, in a multicultural world, what is ethical? What is right for one group might not be right for another. Well, I'm not a cultural relativist. I think there has to be fundamental elements within the ethical narrative to ensure that there's a foundation stone upon which we build our nature, in which we build our decision making. An exceptionally good book called The American Dilemma looked at the nature of the core creed of that society in the 40s to determine whether or not the nature of the Negro relationship was embedded in racism. We're not in a position now to discuss that book. I may consider it later in the series. But it really comes down to the awareness that when you're dealing with decisions, you must have an inner locus of control. One of the books we'll look at in the future will be Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he talks about a core central locus, a core set of how you define yourself as a decision rudder to enable you to be an effective human being, let alone leader. So how does this all relate to the world of management and leadership? If we're able to understand and marry these five fingers, each one independent, and bring them together, we have a fist. And that fist can be very powerful. It means we never lose sight of what we are as an organization. We never lose sight of ourselves as a human being. We never lose sight of ourselves as a leader. We're empathetic and aware that other people want to work with us. Other people need to be respected as we need to be respected. We need to challenge assumptions. I mean, the whole essence of Western civilization is the capacity to challenge assumptions and really to offend. The evolution of the Renaissance period challenged the environment of the time, but if they didn't, we'd be in a very boring world today. The idea of knowing what you stand for and being able to use that as an anchor to evaluate and develop alternate positions and to leave egos at the door is an incredibly important element of leadership, but it can be very difficult for a lot of people because for a lot of people, the position of leadership within an organization is how they define themselves. It shouldn't be. We're much more complex than that. But if you define yourself a certain way, allow your followership, allow the people that work with you to enable you to be a leader, to define themselves accordingly. It doesn't mean you don't maintain focus, because at the end of the day, people look towards you as the pivot, as the guiding North Star that'll develop the organization and develop the culture within the institution. But not appreciating how other people perceive you, not appreciating how you make your own decisions, and not appreciating that the world is far more complex than it ever was when black and white TV was introduced, is not necessarily the way to deal in a world that is now replete with ideas and ideologies and identities that are so diverse that, Joseph and his Technicolor coat could never hope to capture. With the advent of AI and other new innovations and technological advances, good leaders need to be able to bring in a whole range of skills and expertise and be able to see opportunities and create new chances. That's what the book's about. At least that's how I interpret it. Do I recommend it? I've given it 5 stars. I strongly recommend, if you have the time and the inclination, and you feel that my brief summation of it is of merit, that you consider purchasing the book and having a look at it, but more importantly, absorb the information and adapt it to the way you see the world. Anyway, as this is our first book review, there'll be an ongoing series through Combined Arms Consulting. I hope you found this of interest, and I hope that you will consider looking at some of the other book reviews that we'll explore. Thank you, and I wish you only happiness and health. Cheers.